Okay, you're live now, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year to you all. So it's Wednesday, the 11th of January 2023, and welcome to the Schools Forum meeting this afternoon. I'm Nathan Waits, and as Vice Chair, I'm going to be chairing today as Dave Jones has sent his apologies. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting online, and this meeting is being recorded. Forum members are requested to keep your cameras on during the meeting, but only turn on your microphones when you wish to speak. If you have any questions or comments to make on the reports, then could you please kindly use the chat function and simply say RTS request to speak in that chat function, please. Officers, please keep your cameras off until you are called to speak. And please can I ask everyone taking part today to confirm that they are present. I'm just going to quickly run through my list if that's okay. Jackie Collins. Yeah, thank you, Jackie. And Dave Jones sends his apologies. Simon Graham.
Yes, present.
Thank you, Simon. And Cher, I can see you.
Yes, present.
Thank you. And Sean Preston.
Yeah, hi Nathan.
Hi, afternoon. And Laura, I can see you on screen as well.
Hi,
Laura. Anne Hibbard. No, okay. And Joe Cooper.
Hello, I'm here.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Niz, afternoon. Hi.
Afternoon, Nathan. Hi.
And Mike Garlick. Yep, we've spoken a second ago. Afternoon. And Sharon Burt.
Afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year as well.
And to you, thank you. And Councillor Coles. And Councillor Madden. Councillor Norton, I can see. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, present, Chair. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Councillor Simpson. And Chris Cademy.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Chris. And Cara Jewell. No. Okay. And then Sarah Darley.
Hi, yes, I'm present.
Afternoon, Sarah. I think we've had apologies from Mike Stoneman, Angela Mann. I've seen you and spoken to you.
I'm here, and Cara's just come as well after you mentioned Cara's name.
Okay, thank you. Alison obviously has sent her apologies, and Mindy Butler.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good afternoon. Okay, thank you very much for that. Have we had any apologies for absence?
The only apologies that I've had, Nathan, are Dave Jones, Alison and Mike Stoneman.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela. And are there any declarations of interest either need to be updated or need to be shared in advance of the discussions tonight's meeting?
There's just 3 that are outstanding, and we will follow these up outside of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Are there any updates on membership? I'm aware that we still have a number of vacancies. Angela, is there anything you need to make us aware of this evening?
Just to say that thank you very much to Mike for being our new rep from the Kennel Academies Trust. So he's now one of our secondary academy reps. So thank you and welcome, Mike. In terms of memberships due to end shortly, there aren't any now. So thanks to everybody who's actually said about being re-elected again. And we just have there's 3 different types of vacancies that we're still trying to get reps for. So one maintains secondary governor representative, one academy primary representative, and academy secondary representatives. And so we'll be asking again after the meeting for reps.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on then, if we can just review the minutes of the meeting. This was a meeting that was held on Wednesday, the 7th of December 2022. Hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to review the pack in advance. But if we can just go through and review page 1 of those minutes, and then page 2 and page 3. It was a relatively short and brief meeting. So we need to ensure that these are a correct record of the meeting held on the 7th of December, and are members happy that these are a correct record? If anyone has any comments or feedback on those minutes, if you could take that opportunity to share now. Okay, so as there has been no dissent, then we are able to approve those minutes as true and accurate record of that meeting. Okay, I don't believe there are any matters arising. Angela, is that your understanding as well?
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I must apologise, I've just seen in the chat that Gemma has joined us in Dave's absence, so apologies I didn't include you earlier, but welcome, Gemma.
And sorry, Chair, just to say that Gemma is a name substitute for Dave, so can vote.
Okay, that's brilliant, thank you. Okay, so moving on then to item 6 on the agenda, which is in relation to the school funding arrangements for 2023 into 2024. In Alison's absence, Angela, I believe that you are going to guide us through this document, if that's okay.
I am, thank you. So hopefully you've all had a chance to read the report. But this report follows the previous reports that we've gone to come to schools forum about, and what our approach would be to setting the budget if we had more or less funding than what we needed to pass to schools, because you probably already know, but the funding that comes to Portsmouth as a local authority is based on the 21 census information, but what we pass out to yourselves is based on October 22 census. So depending on how pupil characteristics change, it means that our funding might not be quite in line with how we need to pass it out to yourselves. So in terms of our proposals, we wanted to pass the schools block funding out as per the national funding formula. When we used all the factors that we'd previously agreed and discussed with yourselves, there was a £500,000 funding shortfall. But when Alison re-looked at what we needed for our growth funding criteria, we felt as though that was less in the coming years than the funding that we'd received for growth funding. So we've taken £500,000 out of there to use to be able to fund what the national funding formula would be for mainstream schools. So as a result of that, we've been able to give the minimum funding guarantee of the 0.5% and pass on the area cost adjustments. As the report also mentions, there's 4 schools that received funding from the minimum funding per pupil levels, and it was 7 last year. In terms of the central schools block, we've seen an increase of the funding of just under 36,000, and then that will pay for the increased licence costs and the increased costs of the other services that are funded through that. In terms of early years, we tried to do something earlier than we did last year. So I think, as you know, we went out to consultation before we knew the final figures for the hourly rates. When we got that, and we the report does detail what our response rates were, and the comments that we got back for that consultation. When we actually got the funding announced in December, it was slightly higher than what we'd put in the consultation, which was always known that it could slightly change. So it was slightly more than what we thought we might get. But, we do acknowledge, where the sector is in terms of funding and the financial pressures that are being felt. But in table 5, we've outlined what we're proposing in terms of passing out settings, and we've compared it to the 22-23 figures for your information. And the amount that is centrally retained per hour is staying the same as what we provided in the consultation. In addition to the formula funding providers, we'll see an increase in the Disability Access Fund, which has increased to at least £828 per eligible child. And the early years pupil premium for eligible 3 and 4 year olds has increased to 62 pence an hour from the 1st of April 2023. It was mentioned in the consultation as well, but the DFE has changed how early year settings for the teachers pay and pension grants have been funded. So that was put into the overall hourly rate, and we've had to take that out to make provision to give settings the same amount of funding that they had under the separate grants in 22-23 and prior. So it's proposed to distribute that grant on £181 per pupil for the number of on roll for the 22 census. Moving on to the high needs, at the moment we got the rules for the high needs on the 16th of December, and that has conditions attached to it. So we've only been able to look at part of the high needs funding at the moment. So the report contains what we're putting forward in terms of special school places and also alternative provision places. I probably should have mentioned it in terms of the schools block as well, but the supplementary grant funding has been that we got for 22-23 is now within our block funding. So all of the supplementary grant for the mainstream schools is in the formula funding. And then for the supplementary grant 22-23 that we've received, that is now in the high needs block funding that we've got for 23-24. So some of the rules for that, which we'll be coming back in February for, is that we have to give special schools a minimum funding guarantee of 3%, but that's against the 21-22 baseline. And also there is the additional grant funding that also has different rules that are attached to that. The additional grant funding was announced in the autumn spending review. Details were released in December for the mainstream schools as well, and we're hoping to give you the schools indicative budgets when we send out the rest of the budget information, and we'll be using the same methodology. I think for 22-23 we slightly underestimated what schools actually got but hopefully it's just an indicative, and it might help schools to budget. In terms of the high needs, we've been told that we have to allocate it. I think it's in a different way. I can't remember whether it's 3.4% on 22-23 figures. We're working our way through those, and I'll give you the proper details next month when we cover the whole of the high needs. So so hopefully I've covered the main points of the different DSG, but I know there's a lot to take in, and more of the detail in the appendices as well. There's different bits of this that need to be voted on by different people, which and probably one of the other specific things I should have mentioned, sorry, in the schools block is about the de-delegation for maintained schools only in 6.1. That is slightly less per pupil than the paper that we brought last year. Well, it was last year actually, but in December. So I'm happy to take any questions that people might have.
Okay, thank you. Over to colleagues if anyone has any questions. If you can either raise your hand or type them. I'll take Sean first of all. Cher, I'll come to you.
Thank you. Just first of all, thank you for the comprehensive nature of the report. I found it really useful for all the information. It's really reassuring that even though despite we've got a funding deficit for the schools block, you managed to release the funding to enable that to work. So thank you for that. My question was more about future planning for beyond next year. Obviously, with no hard national funding formula, are we concerned that in 24-25 there may potentially be another funding shortfall, and there won't potentially be the ability to top it up with funds from elsewhere? And do we just need to think about what that might look like moving forward, so we're not chasing our tails in 12 months' time? I don't know if there's any indication as to what that might look like at all, Angela.
No, at the moment we've only really focused on 23-24, and our next priority is to try and get the high needs out. We had the information very late. We might be able to do some modelling. Like I say, it's like at the moment our funding is lagged. So and then of course we also don't know what they'll do with the additional grant. I think it will be part of the block again come next year. So I suppose it's about how much energy we want to put into the unknowns. I mean, we do know we have got the carry forward as well. Thankfully, we don't feel as though we have to use that carry forward. We can release it from the funding that we've got in the year 23-24. But we'd welcome your thoughts, and we're very aware of the financial pressures that schools have got, and if there is anything that you can think of that we can do to work with yourselves to help, then we'd really welcome that.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Cher next, I think.
Yes, so I was also going to say I was pleased to see that you'd been able to move that money from the growth fund to support the deficit, and also really to say, have we, since the deficit issue and the lag seems to be built in, is that an issue that again presumably is a problem for other local authorities, and is it something that we talk to our contacts in government about sort of changing that, because that is not helpful?
So I suppose because of this has probably affected us more this year, because this is the first time that we haven't had our disapplication request, so potentially it's been masked. And I don't know whether it was 2 years ago, just before COVID, our pupil characteristics were, slightly better actually than what we got the funding for. So we're in a different position. So yeah, it is because it's it's the way I suppose everything is at the moment. One would anticipate that we would be in a similar position next year. So we could definitely sort of try and raise it. Sarah, we can try and look at talking to Mike about it, see what forums Mike goes to, and we can raise it at our meetings that we have with the DFE as well. And I suppose it depends on how much the funding overall is, isn't it? Because I suppose if there's a certain amount of funding that's going to be carved up, then different things could be, affected to keep within that envelope. But it certainly has affected us this year. So we can raise that.
And just very quickly, I think there would be a number of elements of the funding process that I think we would want to be raising with central government, which probably comes as no surprise from the conversations we've been having recently. So yes, and Mike is present in the ADs network in the South, so I'm sure these conversations, in fact I know these conversations are going on across other areas, no surprise to you again. So we will be raising some questions, some curiosity, I guess. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Graham, I think you were perhaps next with your hand up. Have you still got a question?
Yes, please. Just to say again, thank you for the hard work that goes into this, an awful lot of number crunching. A couple of questions, if I just take them in order of the paper for me. 5.3 on the minimum funding level. Can I just clarify what the Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 only schools are? Who are they? Because obviously it's quite strange that we have Key Stage 3, primary, secondary, all through. Who are they?
Oh, so sorry, was it the Key Stage 3 only schools that?
Yes, I'm just querying why we have that different rate there.
I think it's just because of those are the ones that they set nationally, so different local authorities have different sort of school setups.
Do we have any schools that apply in that position for us? Or are they just?
No, they're just for information, I believe. Yes.
Okay, because obviously 6,000 for Key Stage 4 is an awful lot of money. That's more than a college. Sixth formers would get in a college, for example, isn't it? So if you've got Key Stage 4 and you've got upper 1 and upper 2 in sixth form, you would not get £6,000 per child.
If I can interject,
Is that
that's okay.
rate?
Sorry. I'll probably get some clarity. I think my understanding of this is these are the minimum per pupil funding level rates that are applied by the DFE for those individual phases. So it's just that's the way it works. If that is the case, you look at secondary 5715, that's effectively 3 lots of Key Stage 3 and 2 lots of Key Stage 4. So those are just the rates that are defined by the DFE that we have no control over without needing to get a disapplication request, I believe, Andrew, is my understanding of that. And I don't believe there are schools who are just Key Stage 3 or Key Stage 4 only in Portsmouth. That's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, that is, yes, that's how Sean explained it is correct.
Can I just begin just to ask the question? It was my understanding that we paid a different rate to Key Stage 4 pupils at the UTC Portsmouth in previous years. So is that still the case, that those pupils are being given a different weighting than Key Stage 4 pupils in secondary schools?
I'll need to check, Niz, on that.
So that was my question that I was asking in a roundabout way. because there is one, because obviously the UTC is Key Stage 4 only and Key Stage 5. So it's just clarifying what, you know, a secondary, you know, it is complex, isn't it? But just clarify that. So maybe if we could just establish what that is for
Yeah.
sure.
I'll double check that and make sure it's in the minutes.
Yeah, if we could bring
the-
that answer back to the next meeting, that would probably be helpful, wouldn't it?
Yes, I mean, but these are the national ones, so we have to honour these in terms of our funding. So, but I will check as to which schools fall into those two different categories so that I can confirm.
Okay, thank you. 6.1, the dedelegation figure. Presumably that service then is only available for those schools that are paying into that. I'm guessing the brokerage and the school improvement.
It is, yes. So it's the government see it as the same sort of role that an academy trust would provide to its schools. So yes, it only applies to our maintained schools.
Which is fine unless you're voluntary aided and you're paying double, just for the records, because we have to pay as well to our voluntary aided counterpart. So which is fine. And then 7.3, the licenses is a good whack of money. It's just a question: do we need those licenses? Does anybody actually ever investigate them? Because there's some interesting one, actually, the Phonographic Performance Limited. So I think it's brilliant that we've got those, but does anybody actually review whether they're appropriate and applicable at this stage, or do we just keep going, as is often the case with budgets?
So it's a bit of an odd one, but the DFE tell us we have to have these, and instead of keeping the money, they tell us we have to have them, tell us the cost, and then give us the funding for it along with the rest. So it's not something that we can look at and say, actually, we're not having that one. They tell us, I'm afraid. So hopefully it's covering you all for things that perhaps you don't realise you need cover for in schools.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. That's it from me. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just ask for clarity? Does that apply to all schools, be them maintained or academies?
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you both, and thank you to colleagues for additional input and feedback there. Cara, I think you are next.
Hello. Obviously, I'm going to ask regarding the early years funding as early years rep. So first of all, can I start with a thank you, because I know I've been moaning a lot over the last few years regarding the early years rate, and it's really positive to see that Portsmouth are actually advocating. For those who don't know early years funding, the government are paying 60p for an early years pupil premium, so to see 62p is a positive, as also the DAF funding, so the Disability Access Fund, that rate is being offered slightly higher. But you will also be aware, if you were here last year, that we have very strict ratios in early years. We're governed by the ratio, we're governed by the qualifications ad infinitum, but actually to see an increase on the minimum wage coming in April, we're all very worried. As you can imagine, our staff are on very low money anyway, and to see an increase on those rates is good, and particularly to notice that the amount the council are retaining, so the council can retain 5% of the overall funding, and on one of the rates, I forget which, sorry, I put my notes down, they're actually retaining 4p, which is a 4%, which is a real positive for Portsmouth, because a lot of local authorities are just maintaining that 5%. That being said, can I also yet again stress how concerning a picture it is for providers both in Portsmouth and nationally, that we've got a minimum wage about to go up by 90p, and for some of our staff, a 2-year-old, you're allowed 4 children. If you imagine those 4 children are not going to push up that rate for every single provider. And also, obviously, this rate is the main source of income for most providers. It's very rare you have additional money, so this money is. So could I also ask again that we raise, and I'm sure Mindy and early years team and Sarah and everyone is, but can we raise again our concerns with the DFE, particularly the oversight now to put the 3 pence of teacher pay into the base rate, because the DFE have said we've listened to you as a sector and we've raised the rate only if you're a teacher, and not only if you're a qualified teacher, but a qualified teacher in a school-based setting. So even if your setting is all staff with teachers, if you're a voluntary or independent, there is no raise. So obviously, can I just please again ask that we are raising yet again the concerns? Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I think, next.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And it's always difficult when you join a schools forum sort of at a different time and other people have been in. So my question is around the growth fund. I just read the policy, which I know was agreed here in this forum in January for implementation from April, from what I can read, or is that about to happen? I'm not sure. It just says the criteria to determine. This is looking at the annex criteria below to determine whether a school is eligible for funding for growth fund was agreed at schools forum in January 23. So there's a question around that. But secondly, I think it's great that the council has been able to use some of this funding to unblock a shortfall. But looking at the criteria, I'm just interested about whether that is in the best interests of all children and schools and academies in Portsmouth, if it's only funded when there's been an agreed capacity change in a school. So we know that in Portsmouth, or certainly I do since working in Portsmouth, that there are schools that are under PAN at the moment that are being asked to take quite a lot of children at the moment. And unless I'm reading this wrong, they would not be entitled to any of this because that's not an agreed raise in their PAN. And I'm just wondering about how those schools and academies are therefore being supported. And I come from a background where, from an organisation which works across a lot of authorities, and different authorities have different approaches. So it's just a point about that, and going back to what was said at the start, by not funding those schools that might be improving, that might be becoming increasingly popular, which are then taking in large numbers of children within a year, across a year, that doesn't look like the growth funding in Portsmouth would be applicable to them. And therefore, I'm just questioning whether that's in the best interest of those children in schools and academies.
Angela, I see you raised your hand. Presume you want to
sorry.
respond to that.
Yeah, so hopefully I can answer some of those. So in terms of the proposal for the growth fund criteria is to use the same criteria as what we had agreed for last year, but we have to update it for the year. So that's the only thing that's changed on the growth funding, but we have to get it agreed. So it is the same principles. In terms of the PAN, and I need to double check, but from memory, I think that is actually enforced in the regulations, because I know we looked at it a few months ago with Alison, and from what I saw, Niz was nodding, but I think they say that it has to be above the agreed PAN, but I can double check that. But so that's why we've got that in our scheme and rules, because I think we have to actually, but I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's one of the things that we do actually have to do. But
okay.
the reason
I'm just aware that other local authorities that we work with have a different approach to that and look at in-year admissions and, sort of large intakes within a year, which are still within the school's PAN and fund schools accordingly. So it was just, I appreciate that this has happened and I'm new to here, I'm just interested in how those decisions are made and how those other local authorities can therefore do something different if we believe we're acting within a set of rules there. That's all.
Mike, I think there is a route of worth exploring with regard to estimates funding in that regard. Certainly that's the experience that we've had in our trust, where you've got a lagged funding issue. So as an academy, you can apply to do that. And there's possibly a route through the school-specific contingency wording that you might want to explore and consider as well in conversation, because that might possibly hits the situation that you're talking about too, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of the estimates funding for academies, and actually we use that, although interestingly the DFE are actually telling us as a trust to not apply again because they've given us some money last year, so they're not doing it again. Well, but we'll continue to do that. It was more not about academies, it was just checking that there are ways to support schools, maintain schools as well, who may not have that opportunity. But Liz, thank you for that. That sounds like schools that maintain schools do have an avenue as well if they have a sudden rise in year, because we know that has immediate costs which aren't helped by lagged funding.
Yeah, and I think in terms of maintained schools, we have our own funding, so we've got the specific what's it, this exact name, Alison knows that I rely on her heavily, but I'm missing her. Is it the school specific? Yeah, it's this. I need to double. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's in recommendation 2.2.1, which is what we would use for our maintained schools. So it's the school specific contingency. So if we had something for the maintained schools, then that would be something that, you know, would be looked at to sort of help them if the growth funding didn't, you know, criteria wasn't right for them. But say that's for maintained schools, and like Niz said, you've got different options if you're an academy. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, I think you had your hand next. Apologies for the delay in coming to you, but I have
That's
tried
okay.
to get them in order.
I've actually been waiting 20 minutes very patiently, but my apologies that I was a little bit late. I had a meeting that clashed, and then I've had connection issues, but I have been present, I have been listening. Just want to make sure that you were aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, that's noted. Thank you. I'm just looking through the chat and around the virtual room. I can't see anyone else with their hands raised. Please, can I just take that opportunity to ask anyone any final questions, comments on any of the matters that we've discussed? Take the opportunity now, either through the chat or raising your hand, please. Okay, thank you, Angela. Appreciate, you know, you've been alone with colleagues who sent apologies as well. So thank you for the answers that you provided, and thank you to colleagues for the discussion which we've had in relation to this. So, without further ado, we're actually going to have a series of votes in relation to the papers which we've discussed now. And the first one, there's, I think, 3 recommendations, and different colleagues will need to vote on this accordingly. So the first one relates to the school members of the Schools Forum, and it's recommended that those school members of Schools Forum endorse the proposed changes to the mainstream schools revenue funding arrangements as set out in Section 5 and Appendix 2. And then secondly, endorse the school revenue funding pro forma at Appendix 3 which I believe is on page 31, but also a separate document as well. And that's for submission to the ESFA on the 20th of January 2023. So do I have a proposer for approval of those recommendations, please? Sean, I think you got in there to propose, and I saw Niz's hand go up. So do I have a seconder? Niz, thank you very much. Okay, so those recommendations have now been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to this recommendation? Okay, so the second section of this is for maintained school members of Schools Forum only, and it's recommended that the maintained school members of Schools Forum endorse the use of the carry forward funding on the school specific contingency for the same purpose in 2023 to 2024 as set out in section 6, and secondly to endorse the de-delegated unit values in relation to the school improvement monitoring and brokerage grant of £10.42 for each primary pupil and £10.42 for each secondary pupil. Do I have a proposer for the approval of the recommendation? Cher, I've seen that you've proposed, and do I have a seconder, please? Joe, is that Jackie? Sorry, Jackie. Yeah, thank you. Seconded. Okay, so the recommendation has now been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there's no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to these two recommendations? Okay, thank you. Those recommendations have now been approved also. Okay, so the final vote relates to all members of Schools Forum, and there's a series of recommendations here which we'll read through now. So it's recommended that Schools Forum firstly endorse the budget to be held centrally for the payment of central licences negotiated nationally for all schools by the Secretary of State. Secondly, to endorse the use of the 2022-23 underspend on the Growth Fund for use for the same purpose in 2023 to 24. Thirdly, approve the Growth Fund, the budget for 2023-2024 as set out in Appendix 1, Schools Forum, admissions, duties retained by the local authority for all schools, and the criteria for 2023-24 as set out in Appendix 4. Fourthly, approve the budgets to be held centrally, specifically as set out in Appendix 1. Fifthly, endorse the early years funding formula for 2, 3 and 4-year-olds as set out in Section 8, Table 5 and Appendix 1. And finally, endorse the place numbers for special schools, inclusion centres and alternative provision settings as set out in Section 9 and Appendix 6. Do I have a proposer for the approval of the above recommendations? Sean, thank you. And do I have a seconder, please? Cher, thank you. Okay, so the recommendations, the 6 that I have just discussed, have been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to those 6 recommendations? No. Okay, so thank you all very much. Those recommendations have been approved. So that concludes the business for the Schools Forum meeting for today, and that draws the meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending. Jane will now end the live stream and let you know when we're all off the air. Please note this may take a few minutes, so please don't start any conversations, otherwise they could be broadcast live. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got a quick request to speak as well, Joe.